Recent Endeavours in Armenian Studies in Prague, A Personal Perspective by Haig Utidjian. I should first like to talk about my research endeavour, and this is interdisciplinary. It embraces Armenian studies, musicology, philology, theology and art history. And there are a number of common underlying principles. A constant search for primary sources and their critical re-examination from neglected angles, a critical approach often challenging self-limiting narratives of the past, fieldwork to capture the tail end of oral traditions, especially in Armenian centers such as Venice and Istanbul, the full exploration of interactions and analogies with neighboring traditions, music, poetry, theological thought, and visual culture taken together, especially, for instance, in liturgical deployment, to reinforce and shed light on each other. The 19th century as a window or a telescope through which to view the more distant past, an awareness of benefits accruing from a digital humanities approach, and the restoration and revival of literary and artistic monuments based on a collation of documentary witnesses, but also treating them as part of an organic tradition with, for instance, oral elements, and seeking the value and the inspiration these may accord us in our own time. The odes of St. Gregory of Narek of the 10th century, perhaps the greatest Armenian writer of all time. I've identified and exploited neglected early manuscript witnesses, as well as returning to known sources warranting re-examination. I've clarified latent biblical and classical literary allusions, carried out an unprecedented analysis of the pneumatic notation found in the earliest codices, albeit post-dating the author's lifetime substantially, to expose metrical features, and using the neumes, undeciphered though they are, to expose verbal and musical structure and to serve as an aid in the assessment of competing variant readings. This work has already resulted in the emergence of hitherto unknown stanzas, the reinstatement of unjustly ignored textual variants, the elucidation of misunderstood passages, the emergence of distinct layers of metrical structure associated with the pneumatic notation and with the extant music, as well as with the verbal text itself, the discovery of hitherto unknown melodies in various systems of musical notation, and the revelation of tantalizing hints. For example, the fact that scribes appear to have compensated for divergent numbers of syllables in verses by incorporating neumes lengthening or shortening the durations of particular syllables, and, crucially, bifurcations in phylogenetic trees coinciding with metrical irregularities. Now, clearly there are instances where gaps in manuscript transmission were bridged by memory and oral transmission, and though this is a challenging task, we now require a reliable critical edition exploiting a variety of different approaches for different groups of odes, incorporating digital humanities tools such as the classical text editor and stematological software. My work includes also new translations into modern languages, studies of the multivalent symbolism employed by the author, casting light on the exegetical function of the corpus, the publication of a popularizing volume providing helpful signposts for the modern reader. Armenian sacred music affords one of the richest legacies of the nation to humanity, yet remains full of tantalizing open problems of international significance. Progress promises considerable artistic rewards also. My work has involved the preliminary collation, comparative study and analysis of extant corpora from various centers and in various notational systems, fieldwork on oral traditions in Constantinople or Istanbul, Venice and Vienna, also embracing early archival recordings, studies in interactions with neighboring traditions on the basis of documentary witnesses, a reconstruction of procedures of redactors of Armenian hymn melodies in the 19th century, as well as a study of the course of westernization. Light has been shed into the procedures exploiting the medieval neumes in the milieu of 19th century Constantinople and Venice. An understanding has been gained of the manner in which the Limongian notational system was deployed by 19th century hymnal redactors. Comparisons with contemporaneous transcriptions in Western staff notation have been undertaken. Intonational nuances preserved in early recordings have been analyzed. Parallels in Ottoman instrumental music have been sought, and hints gained from an Armenian item in the early Chrysanthine notation, for instance. The decipherment of an Armenian contrafactum of a Greek Irmos and the elucidation of hitherto obscure passages in Kabasakalian's tract with the help of a contemporaneous Greek Papathiki manual have also been achieved, as has the reconstruction of the musical and liturgical environment in which an Armenian introit, preserved in the Chrysanthine notation, was deployed after medieval pneumatically notated antecedents. There has been progress in tracing out the evolution of the Mkhitarist musical traditions of Venice and Vienna, the discovery and the appraisal of hitherto unknown sources, and the exposure of links with the Constantinopolitan tradition. A thorough analysis of a valuable manuscript in Pietro Bianchini's hand from the late 19th century, kept at the Library of Congress, was undertaken, now placed in the context of other arrangements by the same musician and versions by other exponents, assessed in the light of some of his own writings, including unknown material located in San Lazzaro and at the musical archives of the Basilica of San Marco in Venice, some of which I subsequently conducted and recorded. The presentation of the results in a public lecture at the Library of Congress was a particularly enjoyable occasion. Likewise, we have striven towards the development of a preliminary narrative in the evolution of the melodies of the Armenian Divine Liturgy, from the 13th century numated sources at our disposal to transcription into other notational systems, plausibly hypothesizing on processes of selection, filtration, arrangement, and harmonization that culminated in modern liturgical practice on the one hand, and, for instance, the emergence of concert versions on the other. I have produced performing versions and directed several workshops and public performances on several of its various incarnations on the basis of this research. A further useful outcome from this work has been the development, in collaboration with colleagues in Prague and in Münster in Germany, of glyphs for the Limongian musical symbols, as also a preliminary system for the Armenian neumes. At the invitation of the Armenian Embassy to the Czech Republic and of the National Libraries of Armenia and Prague, I have organized and curated exhibitions in Prague, one at the Clementinum and another one at the monastery of Strahov, displaying early and rare Armenian publications, exposing literary relations between the Armenian and the Czech nations, and displaying the very rich legacy of Armenian medieval manuscripts to the public. And these have also served to demonstrate interactions between the East and the West more generally, and have fed into the development of my teaching in the form of some of my courses. Indeed, for instance, this leaflet is an invitation to a course that was developed as a direct result of the Strahov exhibition, and which was open to the public at large as well as registered university students, and was very well attended. This work has also led to the publication of 3 monographs in the Czech Republic. I'm also involved in 3 major translation projects. Of course, I have been extremely fortunate in my international collaborators, without whom this work would have been impoverished. And I'm extremely grateful, therefore, to my colleagues in Copenhagen, in London, at Cambridge, in Sicily, in Estonia, at St. Vladimir's Seminary in the United States, and at the University of Lisbon in Portugal. Dissemination has taken the form, amongst other things, of concerts and workshops conducted both within the Czech Republic, further afield in Europe and in the United States. For example, by conducting at the Stephansdom and the Mchitarist monastery in Vienna, by singing at the Library of Congress and lecturing in Washington, conducting concerts and giving pre-concert talks in various cities in the United States, and conducting 3 public concerts at the Metropolitan Museum in New York in association with the Armenia exhibition there. I have exploited dissemination in several different forms. In addition to the monographs I mentioned, there have been numerous publications, book chapters, contributions to learned journals, popularizing articles, public exhibitions I have already mentioned, many conference lectures internationally, pre-concert talks, as well as former lecture courses, mostly at the philosophical faculty of Charles University in Prague, but also for the Armenian Institute in London, under whose auspices I have also been teaching a doctoral student at the University of Princeton in the United States. We have established a Facebook group devoted to Armenian studies, particularly language and history. I have undertaken several podcasts, and I have even set up a YouTube channel under my own name. You're most welcome to subscribe. It includes music, public lectures, and archival materials that may be of interest. And I have had the pleasure of speaking on Czech radio, and I've appeared on several public television channels, talking about Armenian manuscripts, Armenian music, early publications, singing from Dendesian's hymnals, displaying the editio princeps of the Armenian Bible, and so forth. I try to make my courses suitable for motivated beginners, yet to enrich them by cutting-edge research. There are no linguistic prerequisites, except of course for advanced semesters of language tuition. I undertake fresh readings of primary sources in original languages as well as in translation, and always try to exploit parallels with sister traditions and consider ideas, images, and music in tandem with each other. I try to cultivate and inculcate a certain flexibility, try to encourage questions, and invite everyone to keep an open eye for possible connections and analogies. And finally, we try to read between the lines, bearing in mind that thinkers of the past often refrained from stating assumptions that were held in common and tacitly presupposed, and were thus deemed not to warrant explicit mention then. Courses I have devised and taught include 4 semesters of classical Armenian, 2 semesters, and now a third at the moment, in Western Armenian, including an introduction to Western Armenian literature, poetry, art and music in Armenian manuscripts, a course entitled The Angelic Teacher from Van to Venice via Constantinople, the career of St. Gregory of Narek as poet, musician and exegete in the 2nd millennium, early Armenian music rediscovered by late protagonists, and Ottoman Armenians in the era of the great patriarchs. There have been a lot of difficulties and challenges, and it has been a constant struggle to overcome these. But ultimately, there has been some progress and encouraging signs, not least the small number of very gifted students who have been enrolling for these courses. Armenian studies requires no special pleading, and it needs to be based on sound academic principles and good philology. If there are political benefits for the Republic of Armenia that is in a state of war. That is a desirable thing, but that of course is not our primary purpose. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.